My name is Jet Black-Mertz, and I'm a Housing Program Specialist Senior with the County of Santa Barbara Housing and Community Development Division. And I'm here to talk to you today about the results from the 2023 point-in-time count of people experiencing homelessness. However, before I get into the details of our findings, I want to step back and provide a broad picture of what has been accomplished so far in the Community Action Plan to address homelessness. So through this coordinated plan, which was adopted by the Santa Barbara City Council in April of 2021, we have secured 442 permanent housing units, created 436 rapid rehousing opportunities, opened 140 interim housing beds, and transitioned 251 people out of homelessness, and that would just be in Q1 of 2023. So notably for the city of Santa Barbara, the Dignity Moves project has permanently housed 13 people since its opening. 69% of its current residents have experienced chronic homelessness, which is considered one of the harder populations to serve. So thank you everyone who is here helping to make all of this progress possible. So now that we've been given a brief overview of the growth of beds and units, we can talk about the people. So the point-in-time count is mandated by the Department of Housing and Urban Development and serves as a snapshot of homelessness in the county on a single night. HUD requires that we conduct this point-in-time count during the last 10 days of January. So it's a single piece of a larger puzzle, and the information gathered is informative, but should be considered within the context of all of the data available in our community, including the Homeless Management Information System, data gathered from individual service providers, the Fulcrum mapping software, which is used to help map encampments, and the coordinated entry system, among others. The County Housing and Community Development Division of the Community Services Department provided oversight for the point-in-time count, while also working with Simtech Solutions, SB Act, and more than 400 community members. So HUD has a very strict definition of who is counted and who is not counted during the point-in-time count. Volunteers receive training on the count logistics, best practices, and methods of engagement. We even have behavioral wellness come and give a talk about safety when engaging people living on the streets. The Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development has a strict definition, like I mentioned. The restrictions of these definitions are built into the mobile app that volunteers use to conduct the survey. If a respondent states that they have slept in any of the included locations on the left-hand side of your screen, then the volunteer continues the survey. However, if the respondent names any of the not included locations as the place they spent the previous night, the survey prompts the volunteer to thank the person for their time and move on. This way, we are not counting people who are, or we're giving it our best attempt to not count people who are not considered homeless under the HUD definition. Countywide, 1,887 persons experiencing homelessness were counted, which represented a 3.7% decrease from the previous year. There's a shift between sheltered and unsheltered homelessness. The unsheltered population decreased by 12% from 1,367 to 1,202. The sheltered population increased by 15% from 595 to 685, which is surpassing our pre-pandemic totals. This means that there are more people experiencing homelessness in a sheltered setting than there were in previous years, proportionally speaking. People responding Black, African American, or African, and also those responding American Indian or Indigenous, were overrepresented in the count compared to the general population. I'll show some city-specific data for race later in the presentation. We also noted that families of Hispanic ethnicity are also overrepresented in comparison to the general population. Unfortunately, we're still seeing the impacts of COVID-19, with over 15% of those surveyed indicating that their current experience of homelessness was a direct result of COVID-19. This could include loss of income due to sickness or business closures. Continuing with our key observations, there are several subpopulations identified in the community action plan that I referenced earlier, including veterans and families. There's been a steady decline in the number of veterans experiencing homelessness between 2020 and today. There are some remarkable veteran service agencies who have been working to end veteran homelessness, and the results are amazing. With the pandemic eviction moratorium and financial aid, there was a dip in families with children experiencing homelessness in 2022, as you can see on that bottom chart. However, as aid is being scaled back and the eviction moratorium has ended, we're seeing a resurgence in unhoused families with children. So now I'm going to get a little bit more into city-specific data. The first bars of this graph show the county-wide count from 2020 to 2023. A count was not conducted in 2021 due to COVID concerns. You can see the fluctuation between those living unsheltered and those in shelters or transitional housing. I've noted the percentages of the 2023 countywide sheltered versus unsheltered population and the percentage of the city of Santa Barbara. Through efforts such as the Dignity Moves shelter and intensive outreach, the sheltered and unsheltered populations of Santa Barbara are nearly 50-50, where countywide, there's about 1/3 of the unhoused population is sheltered. So here's a more comprehensive breakdown of the unhoused population by city and region. And then I feel like this graph gives a really nice visual of the sheltered versus unsheltered in city and region. Again, the efforts within the city of Santa Barbara are apparent. So here's a more detailed look at persons counted in their vehicles. Countywide, the sleeping location of those surveyed, roughly 1/3 in each recognized category, outside or on the street, in their vehicles, or in interim housing. Volunteers are instructed not to knock on windows or disturb occupants, so a standardized extrapolation method is used. It's estimated that about 1 person occupies a car or van, 1.2 people are in an RV, and 1.8 people are in a tent or a makeshift shelter. The city of Santa Barbara saw a 25% decrease in people living in their vehicles between 2022 and 2023. Again, we can see another impact of the pandemic on chronic homelessness. In 2022, there is a dip in the number of people reporting they had been unhoused for at least 12 months and have a HUD-defined disability. And this number has since rebounded. So you see 620 in 2020, and then 565 in 2022, and then 618 again back in 2023. The blue bars on each of these charts show the county-wide number, while the yellow are specific to the city of Santa Barbara. So first we're looking at the gender. It is a fairly close ratio male to female here between the city of Santa Barbara and the county-wide population. However, most notably on this graph, the population experiencing homelessness in the city of Santa Barbara skews much older than the unhoused county as a whole, particularly for those over 55, which I've boxed here. There are 7 people who are 80 years old or older in the city of Santa Barbara currently on the coordinated entry system list, awaiting a match to housing. So this is looking at just county-wide data, but it really highlights the families versus individuals, Hispanic versus non-Hispanic. So a majority of individual survey respondents, 64%, identified as non-Hispanic, while 36% of the individuals identified as Hispanic. A notable discrepancy is the overrepresentation of Hispanic families. 21% of the families in Santa Barbara County responded as non-Hispanic, while 79% of the families experiencing homelessness responded as Hispanic. In addition to ethnicity, respondents are also asked their race. The race categories on your screen are defined by HUD. The dark blue is the racial makeup of the entire county population, not just the homeless population. The orange is the countywide point in time count data, and the yellow is the Santa Barbara specific data. As I mentioned earlier, Black, African American, African, and American Indian Indigenous people are overrepresented in the point in time count compared to the general population. However, this is even more apparent within the city of Santa Barbara, where we have for American Indian and Indigenous 7% versus 1% of the total population of the county. And for Black, African American, or African, 9% versus 2% of the total county population. For HUD reporting, mental illness and substance use disorder require that the condition is, quote, expected to be long-term or indefinite duration in order to qualify. However, this typically results in a lower count. Because of this, the data displayed here are without the HUD long-term qualifier, which gives a more accurate representation of the conditions those surveys reported. A low rate of reported substance abuse in person living in vehicles impacted the overall percentage when factored into the substance use data as a whole. 51% of those living unsheltered outdoors reported a substance use disorder, SUD, while 33% living in shelters reported an SUD, and only 5% of those living in vehicles reported an SUD. And so that is something that we are digging deeper into to figure out why there is that discrepancy between those who are unsheltered outdoors and those who are unsheltered in their vehicles. So just let these maps soak in a little bit. The top map shows the individuals counted in 2023, and then the bottom map shows the individuals counted in 2022. The difference between the dots, the green dots indicate 9 or fewer individuals located in a certain area, while the yellow dots indicate 10 or more. So it's not a difference in quality, but just a difference in quantity. There's a notable decrease in the number of people counted in the State Street corridor and along the waterfront near Santa Barbara City College. So please keep in mind that we use a blitz canvassing method that covers all census tracts in the county to control for year-over-year anomalies. Some of the contributing factors to these decreases may be a large number of vouchers utilized, an increase in interim shelter beds, and a continued collaborative outreach effort. And so the specific areas that I'm talking about here are, you see these large pockets at the bottom here along the waterfront and then also along the State Street corridor, whereas in 2023, those large, the yellow dots have decreased significantly in these areas. So these next few slides will provide a little more detail on where people were able to locate housing. We mentioned in the previous slide that there are less people in the downtown and waterfront area experiencing homelessness, so where are they going? One of the housing opportunities available over the past year was the Emergency Housing Voucher, or EHV. These vouchers were available countywide. This map shows the location where the voucher holders located a unit to rent, with the chart on, with the chart on the right showing Santa Barbara or Santa Barbara adjacent zip codes in which units were located. And I've boxed those off over here for you. So the vouchers were one part of that equation. In addition to counting people, our team is also tasked with counting beds dedicated to people experiencing homelessness. The green line is the number of permanent or permanent supportive housing beds. The orange is the number of interim beds, which include shelters, transitional housing, or bridge housing. And the blue are the leased up rapid rehousing vouchers that were available. Several permanent and interim housing projects have been added to the continuum of care since 2020. And this has resulted in an increase of 787 beds, which is 46%, dedicated to persons that are or were experiencing homelessness when housed. Rapid rehousing openings peaked during the pandemic with coronavirus relief funds. So you can see that here. And these funds are no longer available as they were fully expended during the emergency period. So we had that peak during COVID, and now we're trending downward again with the rapid rehousing vouchers. Beds created through interim housing continue to grow. This past week, Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors approved 90 beds at the former juvenile hall site near Hollister and Modoc, which is called La Posada. The city of Santa Maria broke ground on Hope Village, which will have 94 beds, including 10 for transitional aged youth. And the pallets that were used in the Isla Vista Park during the peak of the pandemic, which you may remember, have since been moved and repurposed at Bridge House in Lompoc, where it's now called Rainbow Village. There are some exciting things in the works for the county's Cayo Real campus, as well as the Father Virgil Cordano Day Center. So we anticipate this trend in growth of interim housing to continue. Here are a few more pictures of new interim housing beds recently added. We have the Santa Barbara Dignity Move site, which is in downtown Santa Barbara, which added 33 units. Again, Lompoc Rainbow Village added 40 units. In Isla Vista, we opened Hedges House of Hope, which is up to 50 beds. Santa Barbara, the third floor of Hospitality House for Salvation Army added 24 beds in 12 rooms. Lompoc, there's 6 beds in a single family home now available. And Santa Barbara reestablished at PATH 12 beds. So one of the main components of these are the services that are offered. And these include meals, transportation, security, case management, housing navigation, public health, behavioral health services, and links to substance use disorder treatment services with the objective of transitioning residents to permanent housing. And so these are not simply places for people to stay, these are places for people to move on from into a more stable and permanent situation. So I will stop here and open it up for any questions or discussion that you all may have.